Hello, it's April 19th, 2013. I'm at the World Intellectual Property Organization where there's a negotiation on a copyright treaty for people who are blind. It's about copyright exceptions, so you can make works available for people who are blind. I'm talking to Joseph Farrell, who's a member of the Civil Society delegation and is a person who grew up blind, grew up in Africa. Joseph, what can you tell us about the negotiations this week?
Well, I'm pretty new to the negotiations, which have been going on for quite a while. I'm very surprised. I'm surprised at the way the negotiations are going. It does seem to be more of a treaty for copyright and rights holders than it does seem to be for blind people. Negotiations seem to be making things as inaccessible for blind as possible. I said semi-sarcastically that it should be called what it is, which is the Treaty for Blind and Rights Holders, because it's started off, as I understand, being a treaty to make things as accessible for blind people as possible. But there's intensive lobbying from all the publishers associations and the movie picture associations who are branding it as a mechanism to circumvent copyright, and that's clearly not what this is about. It's a human rights issue for people who are disadvantaged, who are visually impaired, blind, print disabled. I'm also particularly disturbed at the fact that this is a treaty for the public, or for the VIPs, the visually impaired people. However, negotiations that go on behind closed doors, of which there are lots, may not be quoted. There's quite a significant gag order. In fact, there was one negotiator who seems to be against this, who said, I'm actually quoting them when I say this is for the public. So it's very interesting that the people who will be affected by this, or should be affected, or should be benefited by this treaty, can't actually shed light on it whilst in negotiations.
Joseph, I was wondering if you could show on the camera the way that you read things on your phone, so people have an idea, for a person such as yourself, what it means to have access to text in different ways.
So, I mean, that's your phone, and I would tend to use a magnifier, which makes it extremely large. So if I want to see the time, I might make it maybe not quite that big, but you use that regularly. If you're looking at a web page, there's a very good way of, this is actually one of the KEI blogs, so that's what your web page looks like, which is minute. You can zoom it like this, but then you're traveling back and forth and you tend to lose your place, and it makes it very onerous. There's a very good thing called a reader, which takes just the text, and you can set the text at the size that you want. So actually in sometimes this is somewhat limited, because that's the biggest you can make it. So sometimes I still have to magnify on top of it. You can make it smaller if you like. That is more of an ease of read rather than an access for blind people, but it's very useful. So you see the difference between that and all this.
Yes, I can. How old were you when your parents were aware that you were aware that your vision was different than other people?
Well, my mother worked it out immediately. She thought I was blind, because completely blind as opposed to registered blind. When she walked in the room, she would look at me or hover over me, and I wouldn't respond, but if she made a noise, my hand would go out. So from birth, she thought that, well, I suppose from 2 months, when children are supposed to start responding visually, there wasn't any response. So it was picked up very early on.
And what was it like growing up in Africa as someone that was blind? I mean, were you able to? Were there barriers in terms of having an education? Or?
Yeah, there are significant barriers with that. If you compare it to Europe, or I'm not sure what the States is like, but Europe's it's very geared towards, it's a benefit society, and they help people who are disadvantaged. Africa, you don't get that. So there's a lot of, you get the two sorts. You get the sorts who sink, because it's an onerous task to have to always sit at the front of the class, ask for the material to be enlarged, quite often the teachers don't actually have the material themselves, they're just putting it up on the blackboard. So then you have to get up and go and stand next to the blackboard, or as it then became whiteboard. There's a huge amount of peer pressure and separation from that sort of thing, and some people don't do it. And they're the ones who eventually don't get the education because it's onerous, and no child wants to be separated from the rest of the group. The peer pressure is intense. You could get audiobooks. It was quite a new thing, and it's from a small NGO in South Africa. So this treaty would actually probably have, if it goes through the way it's going through now, there wouldn't be cross-border use, because Swaziland is different to South Africa.
Or Uganda or Zimbabwe,
yeah,
or other different countries.
But the whole of Southern Africa works together quite closely. So yeah, you could get audiobooks from a different country. But even that is, postal service. It's not very efficient in Africa.
You think for people you knew, including people that grew up in poorer households and had less privileges growing up, would there be an important benefit of having access for the accessible works that are available in England and the United States and Australia, Canada, other countries in Southern Africa?
Absolutely, especially for education materials. Definitely. There would be huge benefit in that. I mean, lots of people, it's quite interesting because also in some countries, even the sighted people with perfect eyesight lose out on the education because they've suddenly become the guide for the person who's gone blind. So there was quite an incident of the youngest children staying home, missing out on education because they were helping people move around. So it's interesting how blindness affects not just the blind, but also their carers in a society where there isn't a benefit to provide a social worker.
Well, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add before I let you go?
No.
Thank you very much for taking the time.